Meditații pentru părinți.
În anul 1992, Brandon Bass a fost diagnosticată cu o tumoră de mărimea unei mingi de basket. Aceasta a determinat-o să înceapă o călătorie absolut remarcabilă. Călătorie care a condus-o către revelarea propriului suflet, așa cum declară ea în cartea pe care a semnat-o. Către eliberare și către vindecare. Doar 6 săptămâni mai târziu, ecografiile au arătat că Brandon era perfect sănătoasă și asta fără medicamente și fără vreo operație chirurgicală. Procesul ei de autovindecare a fost de o originalitate absolută, permițându-le apoi altor mii de oameni să se elibereze de blocajele fizice și emoționale. Călătoria pe care ea ne o predă ne permite să ajungem direct la cauza ultimă a problemelor cu care ne-am confruntat vreme îndelungată, spune ea, după care ne oferă instrumentele de care avem nevoie pentru a ne rezolva definitiv aceste probleme. Brandon Bass este astăzi împreună cu mine la Meditații pentru părinți. Welcome, Brandon.
Thank you. I'm so delighted to be on this program and also to know that such beautiful programs are available here and for the last 10 years in serving children and becoming free and whole in themselves. And so I'm really delighted to be here.
Why is Romania so important for you? Because you told me before we started this filmed meeting, this radio meeting, to talk about your roots.
Yes,
So
it was
tell us
so
more.
totally unexpected. The journey was originally brought by some medical doctors to Romania, and what the journey does is get to the emotional root cause as what it's put some of our physical and emotional pains in place. So it's work that's corollary to medical field, and so I often work with medical doctors, and so because they had such a prayer to bring this work to Romania, I then ended up coming about, I think it was 4 years ago only, and I got off the plane and I just felt, I don't know, as if something was singing to my blood. And I got on the tarmac and I said, what is this energy here that's so special in Romania? And I called my mother that night, and what had happened is she was in World War II and she grew up in Vienna, Austria. And because she lost a lot of her family during the war, she went what is called in German, stumm. We don't talk about what happened in the war. So I knew nothing about my ancestry. I knew nothing about anything from my mother's background, only that she married my father, who was an American soldier, and that they moved to America. So when I got to Romania and I thought, what is this energy here? I called up my mother and I said, Mom, tell me about what happened in the war. And I said, I'm in Romania and I have something singing to my blood here. And she said, well, it's because you're Romanian. And I said, what? And she said, my father was a major in the Romanian army, and he was an attaché to King Carol II. And my mother was an opera singer from Vienna, Austria, and they met in the king's court here in Bucharest. And she said they fell in love, and I was the result of that love. And we actually had a lovely villa in the country outside Ploiești in I can't remember the name, but they had vineyards and oil fields. And she said during the war, she said when I turned 5 years old, I ended up moving back to Vienna so I could be schooled in Vienna. And then during the war, your grandfather sequestered King Carol out of the country, and then he was sent by King Carol back to Bucharest for the secret papers, because he worked in the secret service as a major in the army. And unfortunately, he was apprehended by the Nazis and put into Jelava prison there in Bucharest. And when his brother came to see him, to get him out of jail the next day, he had been shot through the head. He'd been assassinated. And she said, so the reason I never wanted to speak about my background is just too painful. And so I ended up going the first visit here. I was so shocked to find out my roots are Romanian. I actually went to the village, the vineyard village, where my grandfather and my mother first had their first years of life. And so I have felt this deep, huge connection with Romania, with the Romanian people. And I feel such a passionate prayer to serve in the healing here and the awakening here, because it sings in my blood as well, in my DNA. It speaks to me.
And you heard it when you came here?
Yes, for the first time. My mother was 91 years old. She's 95 now.
That's fabulous.
And Boldest. She was she grew up on a hillside within vineyards and oil wells there in Boldest, and I actually found where she lived. I mean, obviously it was taken over by the various governments, so yeah. But anyway, it feels like, in a way, this is my home of the heart. Home of the heart, so anyway.
Thank you for sharing this story with us. Tell us how you got to this point where the journey is known all over the world. How it all began.
It all began in 1992, and I was diagnosed with a basketball-sized tumor. And even though I was already in the complementary medicine field and I had been certified in every area, the last thing I ever expected to have happen was end up myself with a basketball-sized tumor. And it really sent me reeling, spiritually, emotionally, in every way. And I ended up on a radical, life-changing spiritual journey, which ultimately resulted 6.5 weeks later of being in hospital and being diagnosed to be textbook perfect clean. And part of my healing journey was I found a way for all of us to undergo our own journeys inside, to open into the infinite intelligence of the body, the part of you that makes your heart beat and your eyes shine and your hair grow. And it's at the deepest level, at the level of the soul, that you turn the flashlight on inside and you go on a journey inside your body and you uncover what are called old repressed cell memories. And what science has found in the last 20 years is that when you feel a strong emotion, and they can watch this in a laboratory, they take your blood and they can watch this. If you feel a strong emotion and you repress it, it releases a biochemistry into the bloodstream which will go to certain cell receptors and block them, rendering the cells incapable of communicating with the rest of the cells in the body. And if over time illness happens, it happens where the cells are blocked. And conversely, what's also known to be true is that when we feel our emotions naturally, like a child does, our receptors remain open. And so I knew that part of my journey would involve going on a journey inside, getting to these blocked cells and uncovering the old stored cell memories that are there. And I'm sure you're familiar in the work that you do and here. There's a whole field of epigenetics where, and I mean, it makes my hair stand on end. Even 3 months ago, I saw on Facebook a medical report and a video of that they're saying that the consciousness that our parents and our grandparents lived through in World War II, that the same cell memories and consciousness and emotional issues are being passed down through our DNA. And that makes sense to me, because if someone's been diagnosed, let's say, with breast cancer, the first question they ask you is, who in your family had breast cancer? So we've known this since the 1970s, that there is a consciousness that gets passed down in our DNA. And so when I first came to Romania here, I was aware that I shared a similar consciousness with the Romanians and what they had lived through, what my mother had lived through, what my grandfather had lived through. And that part of what I'm doing here in Romania is not just taking people through process work to heal at a cellular level or to heal emotionally is also to clear the consciousness that has been passed down for generations and that is in my own blood. And so I realized I was coming to Romania not just to serve in healing here, but for my own healing journey and for my own healing. I do a journey process once a week when I'm on tour. So this work is being used medically to help get to the emotional corollary of what's put our physical issues in place, and it's also being used in the emotional film, in the emotional field, the psychological field, to get to the root cause of what has put our surface behavior in place.
So the journey is about healing and it's also about freedom. How you put those two together?
Well, I'm going to use an example that's a real life example. One of the things that the Journey has is a company called Journey Outreach, which is our international humanitarian organization. And there's a project in Africa. We've had over 100 projects. I work in 46 countries around the world, and it's translated into 25 languages, so I'm all constantly on the move around the world. So we have a project in South Africa called the Pilipapa Train Project. And on it is a train that goes into the tribal communities where they cannot afford health services. And on the train they have an operation theater with medical doctors. So they'll pull into a village, and if you need an eye operation, you can board the train and get an eye operation. If you've got mental illness, well then you can board the train and see the psychiatrist. If you've got some sort of emotional shutdown, well then as a child you can board the train and work with a journey practitioner. And once the train leaves, then at the behest of the Ministry for Education in South Africa, the journey practitioners come in and they train the teachers how to do the journey work. And the reason they want that is they found that children who were getting regular once a week journey work were averaging 91 to 93% pass rate on their exams, where those who were not getting any journey work were averaging 67% pass rate. This whole is documented in a beautiful documentary that you can watch online called Making a Difference. But anyway, in this program, what would happen, and I can remember this so clearly, I was on the train once where a child boarded the train, and in his journey process, the cell memory he uncovered is a year before, he was 8 years old, he had been bullied in the schoolyard. No one gave this child a manual. What do you do? How do you handle it when someone bullies you in the schoolyard? And he did what any of us would have done. He just shut down. It's like it all happened and he just shut down emotionally. It's like a wall came down. And he said when he went into the school, and his teacher said, turn to 356, page 356 in your history book. When he looked at the words, he said they were squiggling like little worms. He couldn't focus because he was so shut down. And you ask the question, well, how is the journey liberating? How does it free you? Well, the journey can't actually give you anything. It's not about adding in something you're not. It's about subtracting away the blocks, the shutdowns, the pain, the trauma, so the natural shining potential, the joy that a kid is, the freedom that they are, the creativity, the talent, all the shining intelligence that is here can shine. And that's why after a year's set of case studies, the journey not only gets to the cell memory, like this child had, but you go through a process of releasing the pain that you never allowed yourself to experience. You go through a process of understanding what happened, and ultimately forgiveness, where you forgive that other person, you forgive yourself for not having been able to cope with it, you forgive life that this took place in your life, and something happens when you forgive. is when you let go of the whole story of pain. And so a child, they're so innocent. And I wrote, my second book that I wrote is actually called The Journey for Kids, Liberating Your Child's Shining Potential. And literally, even though we cannot make them shine, we can clear whatever's stopping them from shining. We can help them have tools to clear what's blocking them, what's shutting them down, so that the natural love that is here, the light, the joy that is a child can liberate itself. And so this is why the work is so liberating. And I often find that first we as adults, we need to liberate ourselves before we can be in a place to help liberate our children. As a matter of fact, I was sharing with you earlier how the Ministry for Education in Israel, that they said, well, we're not going to give this work to our children, even though it's such big, best-selling work in Israel. We were brought there by the rabbis of the Jewish tradition, and they said, even though the rabbis said, we wish that this work would be in every household because it allows people to come home and feel peace inside. They said, we're not willing to give the work to our children until we experienced it. And I was very moved, Christina, to, after a year of going through the journey work, the head minister for the Ministry for Education, she got me together with 40 of the ministers. And she said, Brendan, I don't want you to talk yet. I just want to let you hear their stories. And one woman, yes, she had healed from breast cancer using the journey. And another woman said, well, I didn't have any physical issues. She said, but Brandon, I had come to hate myself. I spent my life in anger. She said, I've been in the ministry now for the last 18 years. And she said, I have 8 children, because they try to replace those lost in World War II. And she said, I have 8 children, and I got to a point of, I was just living with so much stress and so much anger that I didn't even say shalom to anybody when I would walk through the hallways. She said, I had just grown to hate myself. And she said, I wouldn't even say shalom to the people in the hallway here. And we'd go to a committee meeting, and all I would do was argue. And then I would get home, and my 8 children, they would be late for dinner, and all I would do was shout at them. And she said, I'd grown to start hating myself. And she said, I did my first journey process, and I got to a place of recognizing where all this self-hatred and this anger came from. And she said, I uprooted all of that, cleared it out, and forgave myself and life. And she said that day I got home, and my children were late for dinner. And she said, I thought to myself, what does it matter if it's cold? The food is cold. I'm blessed with 8 beautiful children. So what if the food is cold? And she said, after dinner, she said, my youngest, who's an 8-year-old, said to me, she said, Mommy, where did all your anger go? And she said, the next day I went to work, and I went to the committee meeting, and usually all we do is argue. And she said, I saw everyone else had gotten their journey processes. We got more done in that one committee meeting than we had gotten done in the whole last year at committee meetings. And so she said, so mine was more about clearing this block so I could really let my own divine potential shine. And that's what the journey is about, is clearing what blocks you, what holds you back in life, so that you can allow your own radiant potential, your own soul, to take its lampshade off and to live authentically expressed as your true self.
So we can actually say that if we want to be good parents, we really have to take care of ourselves. Before taking care of our kids, we have to take care of ourselves.
Absolutely. You know what the Ministry of Education said to me? There's no problem with our kids. They're not a problem. They were born, they're fine. The problem is us. And children are like sponges, and they just soak up like little sponges whatever stress we're going through. And when we're stressed, what happens is we just tend to look for a weak target and we dump all over our children. And then they grow up feeling worthless. They grow up feeling that they're not good enough.
How you can coach your kid to his own journey?
You know, children have very little trouble with the journey. If you're referring to not just their life's journey, but to the journey process, children very much understand and are very open as children, and they're quick to forgive. And the journey for kids process is a process that really kind of, in a joyful way, almost like they're writing their own adventure story, takes them on a journey inside their bodies. And they can uncover old repressed cell memories there and release what's stored there. And they're also given resources in the form of balloons that would have made them cope better with that scene. So a sense of self-worth, self-acceptance, the ability to play, to have joy, to understand, to forgive, whatever. And then after they've gone through a process of seeing how easily it is to access those internal resources, and they go through a process of releasing the stored pain and forgiving, then when new cells are born, they're born devoid of that old consciousness. So children are very, very quick to heal with the journey. There was this one child, 8 years old. He came to the kids' journey, the junior journey. And that's a kids program that's held by journey practitioners for children. And the year before, his dad had died. And on the same day, his dog had died. From that moment, he could not speak. And when I say he couldn't speak, he literally could not speak. He went through all kinds of therapy, through psychotherapy, through hypnosis, through regression. He went through kinesiology, physical therapy, and the kid could not speak. So when he came to the junior journey, I said to the head therapist there, I said, he's not dumb, he just can't speak. And you need to set it up so he can signal you as to what's happening inside his body. And if by chance he ends up going to where the day where his dad died and the dog died, give the dog a balloon of the ability to communicate, to speak. Because children are so literal when they do a journey process, the dog will sit there and just bark and the kid won't know what the dog is saying. So they set up the signals, and you obviously know where he went, to his throat. And the cell memory he uncovered was the day his dad died and the day the dog died. And he actually had one question of his dad. Daddy, why did you leave and never even say goodbye? And his dad answered, well, it was unexpected, but you see, I never left you. If you go inside your heart, I put all my love for you in your heart. Anytime you want to talk to me, you just go in your heart. I'll be there waiting for you. And then when he got to the dog, he had the same question. But why did you leave and never even say goodbye? And the dog answered, it was an accident. I was run over by the ambulance that your dad was in. But you see, I never left you either. Because if you look up in the night sky, there's a dog up there made up from stars. And that's me. I watch over you every night. 18 minutes from the time he began and finished his process, he opened his eyes and he spoke his first words. And I became the proud owner of a t-shirt with a dog made up from stars. That is how much our own souls want us to heal. It's like you take one step towards grace, and it takes 1,000 steps towards you. So like this, children, I did it in an example because I think people can relate to a true example, that like this, children just want to release the pain. They want to understand. They want to forgive. And healing for them happens very naturally, very simply, and in a playful way that they can understand.
How can parents do this for their kids? Because sometimes they are too far away from a junior journey.
Yes. Well, the best thing that I would recommend for a child, for a parent to work with a child, is just say to a parent, if you don't have the journey process or you haven't got the journey book, which some of the parents, before the Journey for Kids book came out, they used the Journey for Adults book and had huge results with that. And what I would ask, very simply, is if a child looks shut down or just won't talk, which is often how children deal with emotional issues, I would ask them just simply, where do you feel kind of tight in your body? And have them touch that area. So if it's here, touch there. And just ask this part of the body, if it wanted to say something, what would it say? And just to give love to this part of the body and give a voice to this part of the body. And they may say something very simple like, I'm scared, or I'm hurt. But it gives them a context in which to voice what they're feeling. And when you relate it to the body, children are so innocent. They will literally go to that part of the body, they'll touch it, and they'll let love touch that part of the body, and it will give a context for a child to express. Because we know this, so science has said, when you feel a strong emotion and you shut it down, that's when it releases the biochemistry, which blocks our cell receptors. And so what we want to do is have our children have a context to open up, to be able to release the pain and to express what's here, come to understanding, ultimately, hopefully, forgiveness. So if you want to keep it as simple as possible, just give away, almost like a game, for a child to be able to open up and speak what's here.
Before saying goodbye to you today, I will ask you to send a message to all the parents that are today with us about how important it is to be really present to your kid.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, I did a television show 2 weeks ago when I was in Slovakia on just this subject. And they asked me what did I feel was the most important thing that we as parents can do for our children. And I said, catch your children doing something right. We're always so busy catching them doing everything wrong, punishing them, making them wrong, keeping them small. And if you catch your child doing something right and celebrate that, and really be present and listen to your child will become your teacher. My grandchildren are my teachers. And there's so much wisdom in your child if you'll just celebrate their greatness instead of just looking at what they do wrong. So if I were to say anything, find something to praise in your child every day, and they will start to bloom like a flower.
Thank you, Brandon. It's been great talking to you, and I'm sure that our listeners feel the same. Încheiem aici ediția noastră specială de astăzi. Sunt Cristina Trepcea, pe curând.
Ai ascultat Meditații pentru părinți